thank you again for coming. And I think today we will definitely continue with our Bhagavad Gita. I was telling Patty, I don't know if any of you attended Edmund Bryant's 4-day lecture, but I just enjoyed 4 afternoons of his talking about bhakti yoga and many verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And then he read to us some of the stories from the Bhagavata Purana, and he wrote a wonderful translation of that. And his last name is Bryant, spelled Bryant, and he's a professor at Rutgers University. He's a Bhaktin, and so he knows and loves Krishna. Krishna is his Ishta Devata. So if you ever wanted to learn anything about Krishna or about Sanskrit, or just hear someone who has a sense of humor about things, he would be a wonderful person to get to know. He's become very popular in the Iyengar yoga circles, as well as the Ashtanga yoga circles. He has taught a lot at many yoga studios. And again, his name is Edmund Bryant. You know, I think I'll chant something. I was almost going to submit it to you, but then I thought, you know, we have so many things to read. What I'd like to do is chant to you one of the chants that Edwin does. He didn't do it for us, really. At the beginning of every lecture he gives, he pays homage to his deities, and he has a series of verses that he recites. He doesn't really chant them. He just sort of mumbles them, and we're expected to just listen reverentially and appreciate that there is this respectful moment. It's like a prayer. But he did recommend that another invocation, which is quite beautiful, and I had forgotten about it. I had learned it on my own, and I found it can be found, I mean, many of these traditional chants, we can now just Google them, and you might find hopefully some accurate translation. But I found this beautiful book when I was in India, the only time I was in Pune. It's called Gayatri, and I thought it would be all about the Gayatri mantra, which it is, but he talks about a lot of things in order to prepare for the Gayatri mantra. And the author is Taimini, and I'm assuming he's the same Taimini who wrote a treatise on the Yoga Sutras. So anyway, I don't know if one could get this online or not, but it's a sweet book, and he offers many mantras. In the chapter called Shuddhi, and Shuddhi means purification, he recommends a mantra, and it goes like this. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi. And it's about purification, and it's for people who may not have married themselves into an Ishtadevata like me. I haven't found love for a specific God, and a God hasn't found love for me yet, but I love Sanskrit, and I love making sounds, and that's about as close as I've gotten to the divine for me. So this might be appropriate for me as well as for all of us. And it sounds like this. Om Apavitraha Pavitro Va Sarvavasthang Gatopi Va Yaha Smaret Pundarikaksham Sabahya Shuchihi Apavitraha Pavitro Va Sarvavasthang Gatopi Va Yaha Smaret pundarikaksham sabahyabhyantaraha shuchihi. The translation offered here is Om. In whatever condition a man or a human being is, whether pure or impure, that's the apavitra pavitraha. Pavitra is purified, apavitra, not purified. He or she becomes purified, both externally and internally. And we've all been learning the Yoga Sutras, and the Yoga Sutras concerning pranayama have in them bahya bhyantara, bahya bhyantara. So bahya is the external and antara is the internal. So external and internal, and those words are included in this chant. Purified both externally and internally. When he turns his mind to Vishnu, the lotus-eyed one. Pundarikaksham. Aksham is the eye, the instrument of seeing. Pundari. Pundari is another word for lotus. So give me a thumbs up if it's something you would like to learn, and I will get a handout for you next week. Would you like that one? Got a yes from Patty, a yes from Lisa, a yes from everyone. Good. Okay, so we'll do that. So that was your introduction. Now I propose that we, okay, not everybody has this, but Patricia, Patty, were you able to send a photograph of the gurustrotram? If not, we're only going to do one verse anyway. So,
just the first page is sufficient, or I can?
Oh yeah, page 88. Just
it's a whole ongoing situation. Yeah. I will send that quickly now.
I don't know if Harmony is here, but I know she made a request, and this is, what is it, 13 or 14 verses honoring the Guru, 14 verses. And many of us know the third one, placed in the third place. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshvaraha, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shree Gurave Namaha. But interestingly, that's only the third one. So the first one sounds like this, and I'm going to use Shubhraji's melody. What we were learning last week was those two different kinds of meters. This is another example of Anushtup meter, in which there are 8 syllables per line. This particular verse goes like this. Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitan yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Chant it with me when you're ready, or just keep listening. We'll just do this a couple of times. Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai shri Gurave Namaha. Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitan yena tasmai shri Gurave Namaha. Akhanda mandala akaram. So first, what they're saying here for the whole explanation is salutations are to that guru who showed me the abode, the one who is to be known, whose form is the entire universe, and by whom all the movable and immovable are pervaded. Would you like to break that down? Or are you doing okay just by repeating the verse?
The first word is very long.
Okay, so that's really several words in one. So just repeat after me, everyone. Akhanda, akhanda. Then mandala, mandala. Akaram, akaram. So now we'll blend those all together. Akhanda mandalakaram. Akhanda mandalakaram. The next word, vyaptam. Vyaptam. And then yena. Yena. And then chara acharam. So let's separate that phrase there. Chara acharam. Char means to move or to go. So characharam means moving, not moving. Characharam. Say that with me. Characharam. Putting that all together, akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam. One more time. Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam. Then tat, tat, tat padam, tat padam, darshitam, darshitam, tat padam, darshitam. Yena, yena. Notice it's the same word as in the first line. So let's go back to the beginning of the second line. Tat padam darshitam yena. Now those M's with the dot accompanying those M's, those are anusvara marks. So you go, watch my mouth. Tat padan darshitan yena. So the first M will change to an N with the tip of the tongue at the teeth so that it moves smoothly into the D of darshitam. Tat padan darshitam. But then after darshitam, we get yena. So everyone say yay. Raise your hands and go yay. Yes. Yay. Notice where that sound takes place. It may, for those of you who may not have studied a lot of Sanskrit, it is that ya sound occurs in the back of the mouth in what we call the soft palate. So the anusvara preceding yay has to be the nasal sound that matches that, so that it'll end up being an N with a tilde on it. So it would be yena, yena. So then we get from Darshitam, Darshitanyena. Can you hear that difference? It's quite different. Darshitanyena. Do that twice through. Here we go. Darshitanyena. Darshitanyena. And then tasmai. Tasmai means to him, to that person. Tasmai Shree Gurave Namaha. To that person, my salutations to that guru. Tasmai Shree Gurave Namaha. So then that whole second line, Tat Padan Darshitanyena Tasmai Shree Gurave Namaha. So if we put a tune back in, we end up with Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptanyena Characharam. I'm going to stop right there because I did not call your attention to that same anusvara that happens there. Vyaptanyena, the same thing. Vyaptanyena. There it is again. So you get that transition to the soft palate twice in this verse. So let's start at the beginning. Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptanyena Characharam Tatpadan Darshitanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Once more. Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptanyena Characharam Tatpadan Darshitanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Do you have any questions, remarks? Was this helpful for you to get? I kind of threw this verse at you, but that's what I do sometimes, I guess. Is it coming?
Yeah. Thank you for the breakdown. That was really good. Hello, everyone.
Hi there, Dana.
Thank you for the breakdown. That was very helpful.
Oh, good. Okay. Good. All right. So that can be our invocation for today. And I thought we would, plunge back into the Bhagavad Gita. So everyone say Bhagavat.
Bhagavat.
Bhagavat. Hi, Harmony. And then say Gita. Gita. Harmony, were you here for what we just did, the gurustrotram? Because I had you in mind because you had requested that we learn all those verses. So
yeah,
I'm going to tap that on.
The second verse is particularly tricky, I think.
The next one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all have their tricky ones. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so now let me find my stuff. Oh, okay, but we really should do, have your Bhagavad Gita ready, but also the Shanti Pathaha. And if you don't have it in front of you, again, remember, just follow along, and many of you may know this chant already. It's the melody, which may or may not be familiar to you. Those of you who've been coming for a while, you know it. I mean, you're familiar with it. So Sahana Vavatu. We'll do that in call and response. Om. Om. Sahana Vavatu. Sahana Vavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryang Karavavahai. Sahaviryang Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Ma vidvishavahai. Ma vidvishavahai. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Now, Gita. Let's, we're not going to belabor chapter 1, but because I introduced it to you 2 weeks ago, let's just keep it in our consciousness. So we're just going to, I will chant it, and then it'll be a call, and then we'll repeat it, the first verse, and then the second verse, and then we'll move on to chapter 2, and then we'll chant through what we did. We'll see how we do. So again, I don't want to belabor chapter 1, but why not have it in our consciousness? And so the name of the chapter from page 1, Atha Arjuna Vishada Yogaha. Atha Arjuna Vishada Yogaha. Atha Arjuna Vishada Yogaha. Dhritarashtra Uvacha. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Do you remember it? You have a memory? Okay, we're going to repeat that and then move on to the second verse.
Wait, are we in chapter 1 right now?
Yes, chapter 1. So that's on the first page of this handout.
Okay, that's from this week's.
Yeah. So what I did, Lauren, 2 weeks ago, or was it 3? It was 2 weeks ago, I think. In order to start, I decided to give us all the first 2 verses in the first chapter just to establish the setting and to remind ourselves that this is a story of a conversation, a dialogue between the Lord Krishna and Arjuna. And we're not going to chant through all of chapter 1, but I just think it's good to know the first verse of something. And it gives the tongue something to play with. So here we go, one more time. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamaka pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, on the field of the Kurus, on the field of battle, O Sanjaya, servant of mine, what transpired? What was happening? Dhritarashtra is the blind king. And so his servant Sanjaya responds, Sanjaya uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudhandur yodhanastada acharyam upasangamya raja vachanam abravita. Sanjaya uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudhandur yodhanasada acharyam upasangamya raja vachanam abravita. And here is the translation. So Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, tell me what happened at Kurukshetra, the field of Dharma, where my family and the Pandavas gathered to fight. Sanjaya replies, having surveyed the forces of the Pandavas arrayed for battle, Prince Duryodhana approached his teacher Drona and spoke. So then somebody else is going to speak. But now we're going to skip to chapter 2 and we move to verse 11. I've provided all of the verses in chapter 2, but as many, perhaps all of our teachers will say, the spiritual lesson begins at verse 11 in chapter 2. And Shree Bhagavan, here's something I learned from Edwin over this past weekend. He is not happy with the translation of Shree Bhagavan. According to Winthrop Sargent, the translation is the Blessed Lord. But Edwin makes an interesting point. He says, well, Bhagavan is Lord Krishna, and nobody created him, so nobody can bless him. So how can he be blessed? So Edwin provides us with that logic. And he says Bhagavan can be translated as quality, or Bhagava, or Bhagat, or Bhaga can be translated as quality. Bhagavat is one who possesses qualities. So Shree Bhagavan means the glorious, prosperous one who possesses qualities. That would be Edwin's translation. And I thought that would be just interesting to throw in and see what we can ponder over the week. So the great Lord who possesses all qualities said, so here we go, verse 11, chapter 2. I'll begin with an Om. Om. Shree Bhagavanu Vacha Ashocyanan Vayashochas. I did it wrong again. Ashocyanan Vashochas Tvam Prajnavadanscha Bhashase Gatasunagatasungscha Nanushochanti Panditaha. We'll move on to verse 12. Natvevaham jatu nasam Natvanne me janadhipaha na chaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamataha param. Go ahead and unmute yourselves. Let me know how things are. And those of you who were here last week, do you have a memory of having done this?
I have notes.
You have notes, yes. Many times have I looked at my notes and not recollected writing them or at all. Well, for those of you who were with me last week, how did chanting the verses come today? Was it just like new again?
I think it was familiar, but I think the verse 11 is pretty tricky.
I beg your pardon? The what is tricky?
Verse 11.
Verse 11, yes. Okay.
In particular, the first line, but also the last line. That word,
Yeah.
nanu, going from the nan, it looks like it would be nanu, but if you can go over that word nanu,
Yes.
so chanti.
And the nun, okay. That's the third. Nanu.
Fifth line.
I'm not following. Where are we? Which verse? What?
Verse 11, last line.
Verse 11. Okay. Nanushochanti panditaha. Na. So that translates to na, and na is a negative form. It means do not. Anushochanti, they do not. The pandits, the ones who know, the realized sages, they do not grieve. But we don't chant na anushochanti. We have to blend that. It's na anushochanti panditaha. So many of these words have already blended together for chanting purposes. And we can break them down as you wish. And does anyone else have a place in verse 11 or 12 that is particularly challenging?
Can you go over the,
No,
the
go
first
ahead.
word of the second line, or the third line of verse 11, the first word?
In verse 11.
Prajnavadan.
Oh, okay.
How'd I
Okay,
do?
you have that, the J followed by the N with the tilde,
Yes.
which is telling the tongue. Remember always, and forgive me, I keep repeating myself, but why not? What we read on the page is not speaking to our intellect, it's speaking to our tongue. It's teaching the tongue. So it's prajna, jna, jna, prajna. And it's the same word as jnana, knowledge or wisdom, jnana. Now we could say jna. Everyone do that. It might be easier if you break this down. Sound the J and say Jnya, jnya. Now say that quickly 3 times. Jnya, 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 jnya. For me, what happens is the jnya, jnya, it just automatically goes to a nya sound. Is that happening for you? Nya. And Patty, since you asked the question, are you getting that? Jnya, if you do it quickly, jnya, 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 it becomes nya. It's like a long Y sound. Nya. Nya. It's like when we're children, nya, nya, nya. So then prajna, prajna means knowledge or a deeply absorbed knowledge, prajna. Prajna vadanscha. For some reason, there's a lot of that second mouth position sounding in there. Prajna vadanscha, nscha, the same. Nscha. Yes, yes, Sandra. Is that helping you, Patty? And is it helping others?
Yes, I think just all the.
Okay,
And
so I
interpretation.
propose we just chant that line 3 times, that prajna vadanscha bhashase. So I'll start slowly and maybe we'll accelerate and maybe we won't. Okay. Om prajna vadanscha bhashase. Prajna vadanscha bhashase. Prajna vadanscha bhashase. Now faster. Prajna vadanscha bhashase. Now slowly again. Prajna vadanscha bhashase. Is it all right with all of you if we chant those 2 verses together? Again, let's do that. Om Shree Bhagavanu Vacha Ashochnyanan Vashocaswam Prajna Vadanscha Bhashase Gatasuna Gatasuncha Nanushochanti Panditaha. My apologies. We'll go on. Natve Vahan Jatunasham Natvaneme Janadhipaha Nachaiva na bhavishyamaha Sarve vayamataha param. Are there questions, expressions of elation or frustration?
Leslie, in that last line of verse 12, is it ataha?
Yes, there's another here. Thank you, Elizabeth. What we learn in Vedic chanting is that sometimes that visarga, the H with a dot under it, when it is followed by a P or a PH, we would change ataha param to atah param, as though we were blowing a feather. Atah param, because that blowing puts the lips in the right place for param. It puts us right there. Atah param. Let's do that 3 times. Just atah param 3 times. Here we go. Atah param. Atah param. Atah param. So that is a Visarga rule that we learned from Sonia Nelson, who was Desikachar's student for many, many years. This is a more in classical Sanskrit rather than Vedic. So I may slip back into ataha param just because that's how I first learned it. But either way is fine. And I think since you brought it up, Elizabeth, I'm going to attempt to keep that in my mind. I'm going to try to keep it at atah param, just because it makes the lips ready for the next sound. So in the end, it might be difficult to learn these conventions and these rules and these ways of changing the tongue around. But once we master them, the ease of chanting comes more, and you'll feel a more smooth progression of sound. So is it all right if we move on to verse 13? Thumbs up, thumbs down, or is anyone, yeah, okay, good. But unmute yourself if you want to repeat 11 or 12. If I don't hear you, then we'll move on to 13. Okay, here we go. I'll start with Om. Om Dehinosmin yatha dehe Kaumaran yavananjara Tatha dehantara praptir dhirastatra namuhyati. I just want to point out the second line, those second mouth position sounds again from the Anusvara. Kaumaranyao, anyao. Kaumaranyao vananjara. Interesting line to chant, because both Anusvaras followed by the Y and then by the J, they dictate or they suggest strongly that we make that nasal sound be in the soft palate. So just repeat after me. Kaumaranyao vananjara. Kaumaranyao vananjara. Let's chant that verse again. I'll raise the pitch. Om, Om. Dehinosmin yatha dehe Kaumaranyao vananjara Tatha dehantara praptir dhirastatra namuhyati. That was a bit high for me. Verse 14 is a well-known verse. Let's move into that verse as well. Are you okay? Give me a thumbs up if you're okay with my lowering the pitch a little bit. Okay. Om Matra Sparshastu Kaunteya Shitoshna Sukhadukh Khadaha Agama Payino Nityas Tanstitikshasva Bharata. Let's just do it again and see what happens. See if there was any stumbling block, maybe it'll come more smoothly the next time around. Matra sparashastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkha agama payino nityas tanstitikshasva bharata. So from either verse 13 or 14, do you have anything to say? Unmute yourselves. And I shall seek out.
Could we go over both of those again?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And is there anything specific in those two verses that anyone would like to go over first?
Can we do the last two in number 13,
Yes.
please? Thank you.
And meanwhile, I'm looking down because I'm looking for the just another translation, just to make sure we understand what we're chanting. Beautiful verses here. 12 and 13. He has a lot to say. I have this Ramanuja book here today. It just because it happens to be there. So number 12 is, or no, 13. Where are we? 13. Oh, God. What did I do with my paper page? Oh, here we go. Well, okay, 13 and 14. I'm going to skip to 14 for, well, no, here we've got 13. Just as the self associated with a body passes through childhood, youth, and old age pertaining to that body, so too at death, it, the self, passes into another body. A wise man is not deluded by that. And then 14, the contact of senses with their objects, O Arjuna, gives rise to feelings of cold and heat. Shita ushnaha, shita ushna. Rises to feelings of cold and heat, pleasure and pain, sukha dukkha. They come and go, never lasting long. Endure them, O Arjuna. I mean, it's good to have some sense of what we're chanting, right? Okay, so again, what was, Dana, what was your request? I'm sorry, I got a little.
No, you're right. Number 13, the last two lines.
Okay.
Taha.
Deha. And a deha is a possessor of a body, a dehin deha. Tata dehantarapraktir. Here's another trick we learned in Vedic chanting. When we see the PR, praptir, before that, dehantarap, get your lips to close right away. So, dehantarap, antarap, praptir. So I'll chant those two lines. Tata dehantarap praptir dhirastatra namuhyati. Again. Tata dehantarap praptir dhirastatra namuhyati. Is that all right, Dana? Better? Making sense? Okay, let's chant both 13 and 14, unless there's anybody else needs something. Okay, 13 and 14, here we go. Om Dehinosmin yatha dehe Kaumaranyavananjara Tatha dehantarapraktir Dhirastatra namuhyati Matra sparshastu kaunteya Shitoshna sukha dukkadaha Agama payino nityas Tanstitikshasva bharata. Would you like to continue on with one more verse, or is it better to go back to 11 and chant through 14? We don't have to feel that we mastered a thing. Well, since it's the end of the page, let's do 15 and then go through the end, and we'll we will ask the Lord of everything for forgiveness for all our mistakes. Okay. Number 15. Yang hina vyathayantyete. We'll repeat each line this time. Yang hina vyathayantyete. Purusham purusharshabha. Purusham purusharshabha. Samadukha sukhandhiram. Samadukha sukhandhiram. Somritat kalpate. Somritat kalpate. Now the whole verse. Oh, just on the first line, notice Anusvara followed by the H. Then the M will move all the way back to the throat. Yang he, everyone say that. Yang he, yang he. Now the whole verse, twice through. Yang hina vyathayantyete. Purusham purusharshabha. Samadukha sukhandhiram. Somritatvaya kalpate. Yang hina vyathayantyete. Purusham purusharshabha. Samadukha sukhandhiram. Somritatvaya kalpate. Are there questions on verse number 15? Shall we chant all the way through from 11 to 15? Okay. Okay, here we go. A sip of some liquid. Keep your throats moist. Om Shree Bhagavanu vacha ashocyanan vasochastvam prajnavadanscha bhashase gatasuna gatasuncha nanusochanti panditaha natvevahanjatunasam natvaneme janadhipaha nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamataha param or atah param dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaranyauvananjara tatha dehantarapraktir dhirastatra namuhyati matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agamapayino nityas tanstitikshasva bharata Yang hina vyatadyantyete purusham purusharshabha sama dukkha sukham dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. Unmute yourselves. How did that go?
It's coming.
Yes. If anyone would like to chant any line or any verse or series of verses, you're more than welcome to have a stab at it. If not, that's quite all right. That's the joy of chanting. It's like an hour before this, I was in my ukulele class and the teacher couldn't hear any of my mistakes and I was very relieved. Would you like to repeat it again or go over any particular verse or line or just that whole series? That
The whole
group?
sequence would be great.
Okay, the whole sequence. Good for you. Okay, good for us. Yay, us. Okay. From 11. Om. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Ashocyanan Vasochastvam Prajnavadanscha Bhashase Gatasuna Gatasuncha Nanusochanti panditaha natvevahanjatunasam natvanneme janadhipaha nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamataha param. Once again, sarve vayamatah param. You can hear my samskara. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaranyavananjara tatha dehantarapraktir dhiras tatra namuhyati matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkadaha agama payino nityas tanstitikshasva bharata yang hina vyathayantyece purusham purusharshabha samadukha sukhandhiram somritatvaya kalpate. And because we've come to the end, we can emphasize that last 9 by chanting it. Somritatvaya kalpate. Like we really mean it.
Leslie, I have a question.
Yes.
So when the M with the dot is at the end of the line, do you still do the thing where it sounds like an N? Like Dhiram?
Dhiram. Yes. Only if you plan on not taking a breath. So if you wanted to do the last 2 lines together, then dhiram should change to a dental sound, dhiran so, because the sa of so is a dental tongue at the teeth sound. So then it would be more like an N. So then it would sound like this. Samadukha sukhandiran somritatvaya kalpate. But for me, I always have to work on my breath. So I usually take a breath at the end of every line. But if you wanted to run on, then it would be appropriate to change the mouth position of that anusvara for sure. Is that making sense?
Yes, thank you.
Otherwise, you don't have to. Dhiram, breath. So the breath can save us from who knows what. Thank you for asking. It's a good question.
Thank you.
So, and Patty, where are these classes are still being recorded, are they?
Yes, yeah, and there's a link
if
in
you
the
wanted to
email to
access
the
them-
channel.
So I'm not sure if and one day I will not be lazy and I will update my website and I'll put some of these classes on my website, but that's, I don't know. It's a big problem for me because
Well, it's all on the
of
YouTube.
that other generation. I'm of that other generation and I have no children or grandchildren to help me. So there we have it. But that's but anyway, if you think it will help you, go ahead and download these classes and the one from last week as well, because last week we did a wonderful talk on, at least I thought it was wonderful, on the 2 different kinds of verse of meters, the anushtup, which is 8 syllables per line, which is what we've been chanting all afternoon, and then the trishtup. And actually an example of trishtup, I hadn't planned it, but an example of Trishtub, go back to your books, and my apologies, Lauren, but maybe you know this, Tvameva Mata. It's at the very end of your Guru chant. So it would be on page 90 of the chant book. And I've various melodies. So Tvameva Mata, that is an example of the Trishtub meter, which we will encounter them in the Bhagavad Gita, but not yet. It's 11 syllables per line. So Shubraji likes to chant it this way. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva Tvameva bandhush cha sakha tvameva Tvameva vidya dravinan tvameva Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Or sometimes in the Bhagavad Gita, we might, but I'll do Tvameva in a different way. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva, Tvameva bandhush cha sakha tvameva, Tvameva vidya dravinan tvameva, Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. And I sort of varied it. So you can do different melodies, but oftentimes, almost always, if we've been chanting the Anushtup and suddenly we come across a Trishtup meter, the melody will change. It just always will. Would you like to chant Shubraji's version, the first one I did? Okay, so let's see what happens. Hello, Winnie. Join us. I'm glad to have you here. Thank you. Welcome. So Tvameva, a beautiful chant all in itself. And it's verse 14 of the gurustrotram. Om Tvameva mata cha pita Tvameva Tvameva bandhush cha sakha Tvameva Tvameva vidya dravinan Tvameva Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Tvameva mata cha pita Tvameva Tvameva bandhush cha sakha Tvameva Tvameva vidya dravinan Tvameva Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Tvam eva, you only, or indeed. Eva is one of those words, usually it means only, indeed. You only, you indeed are my mother and my father. You indeed. You indeed only. You are my friend. Bandhu, one who is bound to me, a friend. And Sakha, my companion, if you will. How does she translate it? Kinsman, my friend, kinsman, my friend, or relative, my cousin, my relative, my friend. Tvameva, you only are my wisdom and my wealth. Dravinam can mean wealth or strength. You are my wisdom and my wealth, my strength, you only. You are my all, my divine one, my shining one. Deva, divine one, comes from, and it's a cognate, meaning it's a Indo-European. So we, in Sanskrit, the root verb div means to shine on its own. And we have diva, which we've borrowed from Sanskrit. Diva, deva, a diva, one who shines. and literally one who shines from within. Divine, divine, deva, divine one. So it's very close in sound and meaning. The Shanti Patra, if you have that handy, which Patty was kind enough to send to you. Many of you have already taken it out. Because we're coming to the end, I've offered 2 versions of Purnamadaha, and both of them come from Desikachar's tradition. So today we'll do the one on top. And the only difference is the melody, the swara. Swara means the pitch. So that sounds like this. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's chant the Purnamadaha, those 3 lines, 3 times, and then end with Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And I can't resist, I forgot to put it in, but if those of you who have the final, the invocation for the beginning and the end, otherwise just chant along as best you can. And Elizabeth, would you like to, is she still here? Let me see, Elizabeth's still here. Yeah, Elizabeth, would you like, my voice is kind of done. Could we have you chant out loud from Yadakshara all the way to the end, and then we'll follow you.
Yadakshara padabrashtam matrahi nantu yad bhavet tat Sarvang Shamyatam Deva Narayana Namostute Shrimate Narayanaya Namo Namaha Kayena Vacha Manasendriyarva Bhutyat Manava Prakrite Swabhavat Karomi Sakalam Harasmai Narayanayetti Samarpayami Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu.
We are now all forgiven for any chanting sins we may have committed. But we know our intentions were pure. Okay, according to my watch, it's 16 after 5. Are you sated, everyone? Is there any request for anything else? Or is this enough to simmer for next week? And we completed that first page, so then we can move on in our chanting. And again, and Lauren, since you this is your first time, I encouraged everyone to read any English translation of the Bhagavad Gita, especially of the chants that we've done, and then moving forward so that we have, you know, a good understanding, or if not good, an understanding, we'll put it that way, of what we're chanting, because it might be more meaningful for us in that way.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Have a lovely day. And those
Yeah,
of
we
us on
will.
the East Coast, and
Thank
those of us who are
you.
up in the Northern Hemisphere, have a lovely